Good afternoon and welcome to Shepley Oval. It's not in Auckland but in Dandenong, and it's probably been the worst morning of the year so far. It has rained solidly, but the sunshine is out as Dandenong come out onto their home ground for the last match before the finals. It's round 20, Dandenong versus Box Hill. And sorry to any rugby union fans, I'm sure they'd all be Kiwis about not hanging around for the presentation, but this is an important game because it's a preview of the qualifying final. These two teams will meet again next Sunday at Port Melbourne. Well, the Dandenong side made sure of a double chance in the reserves here today. They beat Box Hill by 37 points, 12 goals in these conditions, a good performance, so they finished second in the reserves. They're looking to do likewise in the seniors. This is a battle for second position on the ladder. You see Dandenong and Box Hill level on points. Port Melbourne, if they win, it'd be an upset against Werribee. Then Box Hill would have to drop some 12 percentage points here today in a loss to Dandenong for that to change the top three positions. That doesn't look likely. The battle is on for fifth spot though. Sandy must win tomorrow and Springvale must win and Sandringham lose if they're to take their position in the five. So the last round, a lot to play for. Dandenong, this is how they'll line up today. The changes from the paper side: Frangalis, Reid out with unspecified injuries. Taylor goes on to interchange. The half-forward flankers Atkinson and Marshall come in with the forward pocket Lacko. Heath Mead comes onto the bench and he's there with Taylor. Well, with coach Tony Elshaw very reluctant to tell me what was wrong with his injured players, I asked him if he was playing games with that team selection.
Oh no, Peter, I think today is just as important as next week. In fact, I'm not even really wanting to think about next week. I think we've just got to get on with the job at hand that presents itself, and that's today. And I think that the team that can really play well today certainly can go into next week, you know, full of confidence, and that's what makes today so important.
Were you keeping a bit in reserve last week against Frankston because you wanted to get this win over Box Hill and get a psychological advantage going into the finals?
Peter, I thought you'd know a little bit better than that, but there's no doubt that, you know, you can't flirt with football and decide when you want to play well and when you don't want to. And, you know, it was disappointing for us last week. Frankston were very good, and it's important we get back on track now.
Box Hill lineup, just one change from the team in the press. Matt De Boer is out with a back injury. Brendan Shelby comes into the forward pocket. David Butterford named at full back there to look after Rowan Welsh, who's kicked 20 goals in the last 2 weeks. I wonder if Brendan Hogan, given these very heavy conditions, might come in to try and blanket the high-flying Welsh. Well, this is the first of 2 meetings in the space of just 8 days for these two teams. How is Box Hill coach Shane Malloy approaching this one?
Well, we're not really interested in that at the moment. We've just, after last week's pathetic performance, we're just interested in getting back our minds back on the job and getting some toughness and some competitiveness back in our game. We were embarrassing last week, and so we're just setting out to go quarter by quarter this week to get the confidence back in our game. Is it a good thing then that you're coming up against a team like Dandenong after that shock loss? Yeah, I think so, because during the year, each loss we've had a tough one the following week. So the challenge has been there, and the challenge is certainly here this week. We've got 4 changes due to injury, so the 4 who come in, obviously they're going to look for a spot in the finals, so the competitiveness amongst the players is there also.
Sam, Phil, good afternoon. I think we've certainly got the best spot in the ground here today.
I'll say it's very wet out there. I think we're in for a fabulous game. I think both sides will be keen to atone for their shock losses last week. They're destined to meet again next week in the second semi-final, so I think there's a vital psychological advantage to be gained from today's encounter. I slightly favour Box Hill. I think Dandenong will miss the likes of Milligan, Phil and Frangalis and Reid.
Yes, they will, Sam. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the Box Hill defence handles the tools of Dandenong. But I think, despite the wet condition, I think Dandy will be good enough to win the game. And I'll be very interested to see how Rowan Welsh handles these conditions, because it is very, very slippery out there today.
Exciting full forward, isn't he?
He is indeed.
Kicking a lot of goals.
Well, we've got Box Hill, Dandenong, the tips from the 2 experts. Ross Booth, we never ask you your tip. Who are you going for down there in the mud?
Well, today I'm not really sure, Peter. It's a bit of a worry, but I think I might stick with Dandenong, the home side. These two were separated by just 2 points earlier in the season. A great game at Box Hill, 2 points the difference, but could be just as close today. Box Hill have won the toss. They're kicking to the right of screen, perhaps into a slight breeze. Beautiful at the moment in terms of sunshine, but I don't know how long we're going to have good, fine weather for. The umpires, Mike Snedden and David Howlett. So 2 very experienced umpires for this big game.
actually the worst possible conditions prevailing for football, Phil, aren't they? It's very heavy underfoot, pools of water, breeze blowing. I guess, you know, it's a footballer's nightmare, isn't it, really?
Well, Sam, I was telling the story to Peter G on the way up the highway about a game back here in 1983, and Mark Zannon's our statistician. He can verify too, because that was the worst day I'd ever experienced, and it hailed, it rained, and it was so cold that at half-time I think we had our feet in buckets of hot water. We came out after half-time and the sun was shining. Well, just to throw insult to injury.
Dandenong trying to warm up with the big huddle there. They were playing cloak and dagger before the game. The rooms were locked up, and Tony Elshaw didn't want to tell me the extent of those players' injuries. Well, he said they were only 1 week injuries, but he wouldn't say exactly what they were. So
he was almost a bit short with you, Peter. Questioning your judgment.
Here we go. The rolling over in the mud. No, it was a little. He thought I was trying to weasel some facts out of him that he wasn't willing to give, and so he gave a bit of his own back.
This is a good ploy by Elshaw, you know, getting acclimatised to the conditions, because they are a little alien to the players. Certainly they wouldn't have experienced as heavy conditions as these, even though we've had a very wet winter, especially the last 4 or 5 weeks. But this centre is extremely heavy, and we certainly, Phil, can't dismiss the possibility of hail at some stage this afternoon either. There's some ominous signs above us, Ross, and that I'm looking forward to your half-time trek out the ground.
Yes, thanks, Sam. I've partly been out there.
He's got the elastic-sided boots on, Sam. He hasn't gone for